Can you explain more in detail how some teams have better resources than others? Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, our team, like, resources is all sorts of things, not just financing or um, parts and stuff like that. Just a little bit of everything. So first off, the most obvious thing is we have a much smaller budget than the bigger teams. Uh, Richard Childress Racing, Junior Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, Stuart Haas, they all have budgets that are 3 times the size of ours, at least 2.5 times. And then you have I'd say they're 2.5, 3 times the budget of our programs, and then their alliance programs are still almost 2 times the budget. So there's automatically this year in Xfinity is probably the most competitive in the last decade or so, and I'd say that range right there. There's probably 13 or 14 teams. Might be 14 or 15 teams with bigger budgets than ours, but then on top of that, they get manufacturer support. So they have sim time and R&D and wind tunnel time and all these things. Us drivers don't get sim time at our team. This is the next best thing for me, iRacing. I have been with teams that do have that, and that's a huge resource because you can actually build your car setup in the simulator and work on it and fine-tune it, and the driver can feel what you're working on. On top of that, they have computer sim, where the computer just runs laps on its own, and you can see your splitter height and how much downforce you're making and what changes are going to do to the car without the driver actually driving it. An engineer could just tell you if it's going to be better or not. We don't have that either. Bodies, our bodies aren't nearly as good. We don't have as nice of parts or custom built components, and we also not only build our own parts, but we don't do that, but we buy stuff used for the most part, and then we reuse stuff a lot, whereas new teams or bigger teams put new parts on their cars all the time. They're they'll never run the same set of rotors and pads at a road course race, whereas we'll run the same pads and rotors multiple times. It's a huge disadvantage. You just can't stop as well, and just lack overall speed compared to these bigger teams. And that's just one small thing. So you add up all the parts on the car, aerodynamics, all of those things, your back's against the wall and you're up against a huge obstacle to try to overcome. And all of those things stem from that lack of funding, right? You got a smaller budget, so you can't afford those things. And that is truly the difference between a big race team and a smaller race team. Nonetheless, I'm beyond thankful for the opportunity I have to be a full-time NASCAR driver in real life. But that's what you're up against every week. So for some teams, some of those bigger teams, they're disappointed if they don't run in the top 5 or have a win. Whereas for us, if we finish in the top 5 or even a top 10 some weekends, that feels like a win for us because of what we're up against. Quite frankly with you, we shouldn't run that good a lot of weekends. And the fact that we do says a lot about our team, the people we have, and the work we put in to try to make up for that, the lack of resources, right? I got a great crew chief that gives me as good a car as he can with the resources he has available, and I like to think, especially after racing full-time in the Cup Series last year, my experience I got from that and everything I learned allows me to take that car and maybe finish a little bit better than I should each week too. So I think those two things go hand in hand, and that's why we're able to accomplish a lot with a little, as I say. I think we're the little team that could. This guy's running quite a bit harder than I'd like to right now, so I'll just get in line, let him go, I can save my tires. Oh yeah, it doesn't yet. So now on the topic of the next gen car, you have a car that is built using parts from specific vendors and manufacturers. So all the teams are buying the same exact parts, same exact components to assemble a car. So it's not necessarily a spec car because they're able to adjust on it their own ways and stuff. But most of the parts are spec for the most part. And these guys are running so hard. I really like to save my tires. the difference is the bigger teams, or let me back up a second. So for right now, because of that, all of these teams are learning this car together. All the drivers are learning how to drive it because it's totally unlike anything they've ever driven. Well, most of them. The teams are trying to find the optimal setup. Yeah, they have all the same parts, but they're trying to find how to build the best setup and get the best balance out of their race car, the most speed out of it with those components. So I think that's why it's shaken up the field so much this year. You see smaller teams running better because the budget difference isn't as big of a difference since they're getting the same equipment. And the drivers are coming more into play as they figured out. The engineers and teams are starting to hit on stuff, so we're kind of seeing frequent, some of the same guys at the front of the field frequently. But, the biggest difference is, like I said, the fact that everyone's working with the same tools. They're all in the same boat. So it's made it really exciting to watch because I think this Cup Series is more competitive right now, but I think in another year or two, or just this time next year, the big teams will always have a bigger advantage than the smaller teams and whatnot because they still have bigger budgets and the means to do more R&D with those spec components and parts. So over time, through simulation, and I don't know if they have restrictions on wind tunnel time and all that, but they'll eventually get ahead because they have more people and more money to spend on those individuals and R&D and figuring out, how to make their cars go faster and handle better. So I think right now it's definitely a better situation than it used to be in this series. But yeah, I think the bigger teams will inevitably get ahead just because they have more manpower and for people to each have their own role at the team to work on certain parts and pieces of the car to get better. And I think they'll get ahead with that, and they have the money to spend on, like I said, those individuals and just getting better. As they do that, they will get ahead of the smaller teams that have less people and less money to spend on those kinds of things. But right now, everyone, like I said, is figuring it out together. And some of the bigger teams hit on stuff, but even some of the smaller teams hit on stuff first, which is really exciting to see. So hopefully that stays that way, but I don't think this time next year we'll necessarily be saying that. We might be, but it'll probably be, if not this time next year, by the end of the year, we'll see a difference. Trying to take care of my tires, but haven't been able to do that yet. See how deep this guy's driving in, burning his tires up. I actually missed my exit there. I didn't want to do that. Guy behind me is burning his up too, so I feel like it's our race to win right now. But hopefully all that helps. What I was talking about in general with, my situation, the Xfinity series and stuff, that is exactly how it was with the old Cup car, and it was like that for many, many years. But it's definitely not like that anymore with that new car in the Cup Series, which is great. It's really good for the sport, great for the fans, more exciting, more competitive racing they're able to watch. And that's what we all want. It's just good for the industry. But Xfinity is pretty much how Cup and stuff used to be for all those years. So Xfinity's still the same. So I'd be curious to see what kind of changes are going to come to that over the years, if any.